She threw his picture in the trash. Arthur's ashes weren't even cold. Yet she tossed him out, as if our 40 years were just a stain on her perfect wall. "He's dead," she hissed. "My son, Matthew, stood in the living room, adjusting his tie. He didn't say a word. They think I'm just a broken old woman. They don't know what Arthur left me. A weapon. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 62 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I buried my husband. For 40 years. Arthur was the spine of my life. I was a librarian, an archivist by trade, which means I am a woman who appreciates order, quiet, and the preservation of history. Arthur understood that. Our home was a catalogue of our shared lives, the scent of his pipe tobacco and old paper, the comfortable wear on the arms of his reading chair, the precise alignment of our books on the shelves. Now, that home is gone. My only son, Matthew, insisted. "You can't be alone. Mum," he'd said, his voice strained over the phone, even before the funeral service was over. "It's not practical. Come live with us. Brenda and I, we want you here." Want. Such a simple word. I was so hollowed out by grief, so adrift in the sudden, echoing silence of my house, that I let his want become my command. I signed the papers, sold the house that held every echo of our lives, and packed 2 suitcases. Brenda greeted me at the door of their home in Summit Creek. It was a perfect house, in a perfect neighborhood, all sharp angles, gleaming glass, and shades of grey. Her smile was just as flawless and just as cold. She is an ambitious woman, something senior at a financial firm called Viridian Trust Solutions, and she runs her home with the same sterile efficiency. There was no scent of pipe tobacco here, just the faint, chemical tang of lemon-scented cleaner. "We're so glad you're here, Eleanor," she said, her voice high and bright, though her eyes remained flat. She kissed the air beside my cheek. "They put me in the basement. They call it the guest suite. But it is a small, cold room with a single high window that shows only the legs of the meticulously pruned hydrangeas above. The furniture is a collection of things Brenda no longer wanted upstairs, a laminated dresser from Matthew's college days, a lamp with a dented shade. It is a room for things that are no longer useful. I knew my place instantly. I was not a guest. I was a burden, a piece of old, unwanted furniture. I tried to make myself useful. My first week. I attempted to cook dinner, the rich beef stew Arthur and Matthew had always loved. The aroma filled the cold house, a ghost of warmth. Brenda came home, wrinkled her nose, and ordered sushi. "We're trying to eat clean. Eleanor," she said, tapping her phone. "All that red meat. It's just not healthy." She scraped the stew into the garbage disposal. I tried to clean, to dust the perfect, sterile surfaces. Brenda followed behind me with a microfiber cloth, re-wiping everything I had touched. "Don't worry about it, Eleanor. The cleaning service handles everything." And Matthew, my son, he simply evaporated. He leaves before I wake up. His commute or early meetings, the constant excuse. He comes home late, long after Brenda and I have eaten our silent, separate meals. When he is home, his face is perpetually buried in the blue light of his phone. The calls are endless. The work is demanding. "Matt," I said one evening, catching him as he grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. "Hey, Mum, can't talk. Got a call in 5 minutes," he muttered, not looking up. "I just wondered if you..." His eyes flickered, not to me, but toward the stairs, toward Brenda's office. Mum, please? Brenda handles the house stuff. I'm just swamped. He disappeared down the hall. I saw the change in him then, stark and terrifying. The warm, laughing boy who used to bring me dandelions was gone. In his place was this tired, hollow-eyed man, a stranger who looked at his wife with a tense, almost fearful obedience. I stopped trying. I retreated to my basement room. I am a quiet woman. I know how to be small. I move through their perfect house like a phantom. A whisper of a person they've already forgotten is there. I am a shadow, and I am learning to watch. Brenda began her campaign of erosion with a smile. She called it optimizing my space. It began with the few things I had brought from my old life, the small comforts that held my memories. Eleanor, this is all just so dated, she said one Tuesday, gesturing to the small cedar chest at the foot of my bed. It was the chest Arthur had kept his service medals in. It doesn't really fit the aesthetic we're going for. Her aesthetic, I had learned, was one of hard surfaces and empty spaces. She controlled everything, not just the decor. She managed my presence. I was to eat only what she served quinoa bowls and bland, steamed vegetables. I was to watch television only in the evenings, and only at a low volume. The first true crack appeared over Arthur's sweater. It was an old navy blue cardigan, the one with the suede elbow patches that had worn thin. It didn't smell like him anymore. Not really. But I kept it on the chair in my room. Brenda came down, her nose wrinkled. You don't mind if I just store this, do you? She asked, her voice a sickly sweet syrup. She held the sweater between her thumb and forefinger, as if it were a contaminated rag. She did not wait for an answer. She folded it, tucked it under her arm, and took it. I never saw it again. Store was just a polite word for garbage. I waited until I heard the garage door close, signalling Brenda had left for one of her networking lunches. I found Matthew in his home office, his eyes fixed on a spreadsheet. Matthew, I started, my voice sounding weak even to me. She threw away your father's sweater. He sighed, a long, weary exhalation that didn't require him to look away from the screen. Mum, she didn't throw it away. She's just organizing. Brenda means well. She's just trying to help you settle in. She is not helping. Matt. She is... I struggled for the word. She is erasing me. She's erasing your father. You're grieving, he said, finally turning to me. His eyes were tired, edged with an irritation that was new to me. You're emotional? We're all trying to move forward, and Brenda is just trying to make this house a calm space for everyone. Please, don't make this difficult. The true assault, however, was on my mind. It started with small, insidious suggestions. I'm sure I told you we had the Hartmans coming for dinner on Friday. Eleanor, she said one Thursday evening, her tone light, breezy. Did you forget again? I searched my memory. We had not discussed any dinner. You didn't mention it to me, dear. Oh. She sighed. A small, theatrical puff of air. She looked at Matthew, a glance of pure, curated pity. See, this is what I was worried about. She began to move my things. My reading glasses, which I always kept on the nightstand, would vanish, only to be found by Brenda in the laundry room. You must have carried them in there. Eleanor, you're getting so scatterbrained. My keys, which I kept in my coat pocket, appeared on the kitchen counter. You left these by the toaster. That's a fire hazard, dear. I never put my keys by the toaster. I knew I did not. But the certainty would flicker, just for a second. One chilly afternoon, my one allowed chore retrieving the mail gave me something else. I sorted through the usual stack of glossy catalogues and bills for Matthew. At the bottom was a thick, cream-coloured envelope. It was addressed to Mr. Arthur Vance. Not to his estate, not to me, but to him, as if he were still here. The return address was a law firm in the city, one I had never heard of. My hand trembled. I glanced at the house, at the blank, reflective windows. I slipped the envelope into the waistband of my slacks, pulling my loose top over it. My heart hammered against my ribs. That evening, I forgot to turn off the light in the basement hallway. At dinner, Matthew snapped at me. "Mom, the light. Brenda told you twice." Brenda put her hand on his arm. "It's all right, darling. She can't help it." She turned to me, her smile tight. "Matthew is right. Though, you have been forgetting things lately. A lot." I sat there, the secret of the letter a cold weight against my skin. I looked at my son's angry, averted face. I looked at my daughter-in-law's polite concern. Had I left the light on? Had I left my glasses in the laundry? The grief for Arthur was a heavy fog, and in that fog, I felt myself begin to dissolve. I was starting to believe them. Maybe I was just a confused, senile old woman after all. It happened on a Wednesday, a day that held no meaning in the grey blur of my existence. I was in the basement room, the door shut, though that offered no real privacy. I was organising the last few items from my life with Arthur, the small tin box where I kept mismatched buttons and photographs that had lost their albums. I was holding our wedding picture. It was my favourite. Arthur, barely 22. His dark hair thick, wearing a rented tuxedo that was slightly too large in the shoulders. He was looking at me, not at the camera, with a look of such profound, terrified love that it still, 40 years later, made my heart ache. I was a thin, serious girl in a dress my mother had sewn. I was looking right at him. The door crashed open. I jumped, the silver frame slipping in my hands. Brenda stood there, clad in sleek black leggings and a tight workout top, her phone in her hand. She never knocked. "What are you doing sitting in the dim light?" "Eleanor," she snapped, her voice sharp with the impatience of someone who has just completed a high-intensity workout and has no time for shadows. Her eyes fell from my face to the picture I was clutching. Her perfectly sculpted lips curled, just slightly, into a sneer of disbelief and disgust. "My God," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Are you still mooning over that?" Before I could form a word, before I could shield the frame. She was across the room. She was fast. She ripped the picture from my grasp. Her fingers were strong, her nails digging into the wood. "Brenda." "No. Please," I whispered. But the words were useless. She snatched it, the silver frame, which I had polished just last week, tumbled from her grip and struck the laminate floor. The glass did not crack. It exploded. Shards skittered under the bed, glittering like ice. I cried out, a small, wounded sound, and bent to pick up the frame. But she was faster. She ignored the broken frame. She reached down and picked up the photograph itself, the physical print, now freed from its protection. She held it up, 2 inches from her face. She studied our young, hopeful faces with abject contempt. Then she looked at me, her eyes as flat and cold as the glass at her feet. "He is dead. Eleanor?" she hissed, the words precise and cruel. "He is dead. Face reality." And then she crumpled it. She crushed our wedding day in her fist. She squeezed until her knuckles turned white, mashing Arthur's smile and my vow into a meaningless, hard ball of glossy paper. I stopped breathing. The world stopped. There was only the sound of her heavy breathing and the faint crackle of the photograph dying in her hand. She turned, took one step, and dropped the wadded memory into the small, plastic trash can in the corner of my room. She did not stop there. She bent, scraped the larger shards of glass from the floor with a piece of junk mail, and dropped them into the bin, right on top of the crumpled photo. I was paralyzed. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands frozen in the air where the picture had been. I could not feel my fingers. I could not feel my face. A sound was building in my chest, a roar of such profound rage and agony that it choked me into silence. That is when Matthew walked in. He stopped in the doorway, his briefcase in one hand, his tie loosened. He saw the scene. He saw the shattered glass scattered on the floor. He saw his wife, breathing hard, her arms crossed, defiant. And he saw me. My face wet with tears I had not realized were falling, my entire body shaking. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice weary before he even had an answer. "I'm just helping her," Brenda said immediately, her voice smooth, reasonable. "She was obsessing again. She can't live in the past. Matt, it is not healthy. I am just helping her accept the truth." "Matthew," I whispered. My voice was a dry rattle. I looked at my son, my only son. I begged him with my eyes. "See me. Help me. Defend him." He looked at me, his face tight with a familiar exhaustion. He looked at Brenda, his jaw working. He looked at the trash can, where the glint of broken glass was visible. He sighed. It was a long, heavy sigh of pure annoyance. He stepped into the room, walked past me, past his wife. I thought, for one wild, hopeful second, he was going to reach into the trash. Instead, he bent down, picked up the entire trash can by the rim, and tucked it under his arm. He did not look at me. He did not look at the photo. "I'll take this out," he muttered, turning his back on me. "Brenda, let's go. I'm starving." He walked out of the room, carrying his father's memory away with the rest of the day's garbage. He had chosen. When Matthew walked out of my room, carrying my husband's memory in a trash can, the part of me that knew how to weep went with him. The shock did not fade. It crystallized. The hot, messy pain of grief that had fogged my mind for weeks receded, and in its place, a cold, sharp clarity settled in. I did not cry again. I stopped being a guest. I stopped being a mother. I became an archivist. My entire life's work was based on the art of silence. A librarian learns to move without sound, to observe, to listen. We are the custodians of information, and we know that the most important details are often found not in the bold headlines, but in the quiet margins, the whispers, the subtext. My new project became this house. I began to catalogue its occupants. Their perfect, minimalist home was an echo chamber. Sound travelled. They had convinced themselves I was a deaf, shuffling ghost, and in their arrogance, they grew careless. They began to talk at night, standing in the kitchen under the harsh glare of the track lighting, believing I was asleep in my basement cell. I was not. I would stand in the darkness at the top of the stairs, my old woolen robe pulled tight, and I would listen. At first, the words were just cruel. "Burden," Matthew would say, his voice thin and reedy. "She's just unstable. Bren, she's not herself. She's a drain. Matt." Brenda's voice would cut back, sharp as a scalpel. "She's a black hole in this house. We are not safe with her here." Safe. They were not worried for my safety. They were worried about their own. Then the whispers shifted. The true motive surfaced. "We need the money. Matt, I am telling you, we are stretched to the absolute limit." Brenda's voice was a low, furious hiss. "The house," Matthew replied. "She got the money from the house. It's not enough. Do you have any idea what our overhead is? It's sitting in her account, doing nothing. We can't let her just sit on it if she's unwell." I stood in the dark, my hand gripping the cold banister. I was puzzled. The money from my house was modest. It was my nest egg, enough for me to live on. But it was not a fortune. It was certainly not enough to fund their life of gleaming European appliances and leased luxury cars. Why were they so desperate for my small savings a few nights later? I heard the name that changed everything. Brenda was stressed, pacing the kitchen. I could hear the click of her heels on the tile. "He's asking again. The pressure is on." "Hartman." Matthew's voice was small, frightened. "Yes, Hartman." Brenda's voice dropped, and the chill of it seeped into my bones. "My boss doesn't like loose ends. Matt, he would be very, very happy if we could solve this problem here." He made it clear that family disruptions are not good for an executive's performance. There was a long silence. Even Matthew, in his willful blindness, seemed to understand the implication. What do you mean, solve?" he finally whispered. "I mean," Brenda said, her voice flat, devoid of all emotion, "that there are facilities for this, excellent ones, secure, places for forgetful old people. If we can show she's not competent, we can take control of her assets, we can manage her. Hartman would see that as decisive. He would see that as strong." My blood turned to ice. They were planning to dispose of me. They were planning to lock me away, not just to get my money, but to impress her boss. The next phase of their plan began a week later. Brenda approached me, her face arranged in a mask of synthetic concern. "Eleanor, we've been so worried about you, with the stress and all the confusion." I played the part. I looked up at her, my eyes wide and vague. "We've made an appointment for you," she continued, her voice syrupy. "With a wonderful doctor, a specialist in geriatric health, just to make sure you're getting all the support you need." I knew the name of every reputable geriatric specialist in the state. I had never heard of the man she named. Matthew delivered the final, cowardly blow that afternoon. He found me in the kitchen, pretending to read a magazine. He would not look at me. He just stared at the countertop. "Mom," he said, his voice strained. "About that doctor, it's just a checkup, just for our peace of mind, so we know how to best take care of you." I looked at my son, at the weak line of his jaw. A librarian knows the difference between a checkup and an evaluation. This was not about my health. This was about my competency. This was not a visit. It was an assessment. They were laying the tracks to have me declared unfit, to prove I was the senile, doddering woman they had been pretending I was. They were building my cage. The appointment with the specialist was set for Monday. They were giving me 5 days to be certified as a lost cause. The woman who had wept for her husband, the woman who had allowed herself to be bullied and gaslighted, was gone. In her place, the archivist remained, and the archivist remembered the envelope. I had hidden it, that thick, cream-coloured paper, beneath the lining of my oldest suitcase. A firm I had never heard of, writing to a man who was dead. The next morning, I told Brenda I felt foggy and needed a walk in the park. The word foggy was a gift to her. It confirmed every lie she had been telling, and she practically shooed me out the door, reminding me not to get lost. I did not go to the park. I walked 3 miles to a drugstore and, with $80 in cash I had hoarded from my grocery allowance, I bought a prepaid cellular phone. I activated it in the parking lot. I called the number on the envelope Fincher and Associates, Estate Law. A man with a kind, serious voice answered. I introduced myself. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, he said, and I heard the sound of a keyboard. Yes, we have been waiting for your call. Please accept our condolences on the passing of Mr. Vance. Waiting for me, I didn't know my husband used your firm. Mr. Vance retained us 4 months ago, the man explained, his voice patient. His instructions were specific. We were not to contact you directly. He said you would call when you needed to. He left a private letter for you in our care, and he established a new safe deposit box. Your name is the only one on the account. He was very clear about that. My blood ran cold. When can I see these things? Whenever you are ready. Mrs. Vance. We have the key and the letter here. I took a bus to the city. I told the receptionist at the law firm that I could not stay, that I was just checking. The kind man, Mr. Fincher himself, understood. He handed me the letter and a single, small, cold metal key. The bank was a marble tomb downtown, not our local branch. The key felt heavy in my hand, its edges sharp, a piece of a life I had never known. I signed the ledger, and a guard escorted me into the vault, into a small, private room. He slid the long, thin metal box from the wall and left me alone, locking the door behind him. I sat there, the silence of the vault pressing in. I lifted the lid. It was not what I expected. There were no bundles of money, no stocks, no jewellery. It was just a box of information. On the bottom lay a thick, leather-bound ledger, the kind Arthur used to use years ago, before everything went digital. Beside it was a small, black, portable hard drive, and on top of it all, a single envelope, thick as the first one, with my name on it in his precise, familiar handwriting. Eleanor. I opened the letter first. My dearest Ellie, if you are reading this, I am gone, and I am sorry. I never wanted you to be burdened with this, but I could not leave you unprotected. My job at the firm, it was a cover story. My love. For the last 20 years, I was not just an accountant. I was a forensic investigator for a small, now defunct agency that monitored financial crimes. When they shut down, I kept the title. But I worked privately for them, on referral. I looked for the patterns people tried to hide. I was working on one last case before I retired. I was going to surprise you. I found a network. Ellie, a massive, dirty money laundering ring operating through venture capital funds. It was complex. It was dangerous. But I found it. I dropped the letter. I remembered him, 2 months ago, rubbing his eyes at the kitchen table. Just a few more weeks. Ellie, he'd said, I found something big. We're going to retire early. The doctors had called it a massive, sudden coronary event. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. My hands were steady now. The grief was still there, but it was a cold, hard stone. I picked up the heavy leather ledger. I opened it. It was not filled with names. It was filled with numbers, columns and columns of transaction codes, dates, and routing numbers for banks I had never heard of. It was Arthur's work, his proof. And in the margin of the very last page, written in his red ink, was a name repeated 3 times, circled, with a thick question mark beside it. Viridian Trust Solutions. I rode the bus back to Summit Creek, the hard drive a solid weight in my purse, the ledger tucked against my chest. The grief I felt in that vault, the profound sorrow for the man I knew, had been burned away. It was replaced by something else, a terrible, glacial fury. Arthur's sudden heart attack, just weeks after he found his big thing, it was not a coincidence. It was a consequence. They had not just watched him die, they had pushed him over the edge. The crushing stress, the threats he must have been under my husband had not died of natural causes. He had been murdered by inches. I returned to the cold basement room, but it was no longer a cell. It was my reading room, my operations center, my old laptop. The one Brenda openly despised as a dinosaur was slow, but it was not connected to their home network. It was clean. I waited until I heard the telltale thump of the heavy front door closing. Brenda leaving for her yoga class. I locked my door, a flimsy gesture, and plugged the hard drive into the USB port. The drive mounted. It was organized with Arthur's typical maddening precision. Folders named by dates. Projects. One folder was labeled VTS Project. I opened it. It was a digital sea of data. Scanned incorporation documents for shell companies in Delaware and Panama. Encrypted spreadsheets. Wire transfer confirmations from banks in the Cayman Islands. It was an ocean of noise. But I had Arthur's ledger. The ledger was the Rosetta Stone. I sat on that thin mattress for hours, my back aching, my mind on fire. I am an archivist. My entire career was spent finding the signal in the noise, taking chaotic collections of data and building a narrative. I did for myself what I had done for countless researchers. I cross-referenced. The codes in the ledger matched the transaction numbers on the hard drive. The journal entries matched the wire transfers. Arthur hadn't just been tracking a money laundering scheme. He had mapped the entire circulatory system. He had found how dirty money from unknown sources was being pumped into legitimate-looking venture capital funds. Invested in tech startups that existed only on paper, and then siphoned back out, clean, to private accounts. And at the center of the web, the hub through which every wire passed, was the name I already knew, Viridian Trust Solutions. I went back online, this time using the burner phone's data connection. I wasn't just looking for Brenda Vance. I was looking for her corporate role. She wasn't just a senior associate, as she'd claimed. She was the chief financial officer, the CFO, the one person with the access and authority to build this entire, complex financial illusion. Then, I searched the ledger for Hartman. There it was. His name, in Arthur's red ink, in the margin. It was next to a series of transfers marked Executive Dispersal. Millions. The money was flowing out of Viridian and to him, but the hard drive showed the incoming accounts were being squeezed. I remembered Brenda's panicked whisper, "We need the money." Matt. They were not just over-leveraged in their personal life. The entire company was a house of cards. They were stealing from the money they were supposed to be laundering. They were desperate. In the root of the VTS project folder, there was a single file I had skipped. It wasn't a spreadsheet or a PDF. The file type was M4A, an audio recording. My breath caught. I fumbled for my old earbuds, the ones with the frayed cord, and plugged them in. I double-clicked the file. It was a phone call. Arthur must have recorded it from his own line. The audio was clear. A man's voice. Rough. "It's a problem. He's sniffing too close." "I told you I'd handle Matthew," a woman's voice said. It was Brenda, but not the Brenda I knew. This voice was not high and breezy. It was flat, reptilian, cold. "He's weak. He'll do what I say." "It's not the son I'm worried about," the man Hartman said. "It's the old man. He's asking the wrong questions at the firm." There was a pause. Then Brenda's voice, colder still. "And the wife. If he's found something, he might have told her. She's a librarian." Hartman scoffed. "A nobody." "We can't risk it," Brenda replied. "He's going to crack. We push him. He cracks. When he's gone, the old woman has to go. Put her in a home, get control of her. If she finds anything Arthur left, we're finished." I ripped the earbuds from my ears. The room was silent. My heart was a stone in my chest. They were not just trying to get my money. They were not just trying to put me in a home because I was a burden. They were afraid. They were terrified of me. They were not trying to manage a confused old woman. They were cleaning up a loose end. They wanted a senile, lamb-cam old woman. They were terrified of the archivist. I understood my path with perfect clarity. If they needed a ghost, I would be the most convincing ghost they had ever seen. My performance began the next morning. I came upstairs for the flavourless green tea Brenda allowed me. I missed the last step, stumbling heavily onto the kitchen landing. Matthew, grabbing his keys, flinched. "Mum, watch your step." I blinked at him, my eyes wide and vacant. Who are you?" I whispered, clutching my chest. He froze. "Mom, it's me. It's Matt." I continued to stare, letting the fear on his face bloom, before I refocused. "Oh, Matt. Yes. You startled me. Arthur." I did not miss the look he shot his wife. It was pure, terrified validation. From that moment, I became the character they were writing for me. I dropped a spoon at dinner and stared at it on the floor, as if its existence was a profound, unsolvable mystery. I stood in the middle of the living room, motionless, for 5 minutes at a time. When Brenda asked me what I was doing, I would look at her, confused, and ask, "Is it time for bed?" It was 3 p.m. Their confidence swelled. They became brazen, talking about my condition as if I were a piece of furniture. I was sitting right at the table, picking at my quinoa, when I heard Brenda on the phone with Matthew, who was in the next room. "You have to see this," she whispered, though her whisper was meant for me to hear. "She's just gone. She's declining so fast. Matt, it's happening even faster than I thought." They were fools. Their arrogance made them sloppy. While the ghost sat staring at a blank television screen, the archivist was in the basement, making copies. I took the burner phone to the small park 2 miles away. I called the only number in Arthur's private address book. I recognised Alistair Finch. He had been Arthur's roommate in college, a man with a spine of steel who had become one of the city's most feared litigators. He was the only man Arthur trusted completely. "Alistair," I said. "It's Eleanor Vance." His voice, usually booming, was gentle. "Eleanor, my God. I have no words. I am so sorry for your loss." I tried to call, but the number was disconnected. "I am in trouble. Alistair," I said, cutting him off. "And I think Arthur was murdered." There was a thick silence. "Where are you?" he asked. We met at the main branch of the public library, my old territory. I felt stronger there, surrounded by the smell of paper and knowledge. I handed him a small envelope containing a USB drive, a perfect copy of Arthur's hard drive and the original ledger. He looked at the ledger. "What is this?" "Ellie." "It's Arthur's last project," I said. "He found them, and they killed him for it. His own daughter-in-law is the CFO. Alistair's face paled as he thumbed through the pages. He saw the name. Viridian Trust. Ellie. This is not a small thing." He called me on the burner phone 2 days later. His voice was no longer kind. It was a blade. "I've slept for 4 hours in 2 days. This is worse than you know. This is a multi-state, high-level conspiracy, racketeering. We're talking federal. The audio file. Eleanor. That is a direct threat. They didn't just let him die. They conspired to make him die." "I know," I said. "I am contacting the U.S. Attorney's Office. We can have them in custody by tonight." "No," I said. The word was cold. Absolute. "What do you mean?" "No, Eleanor. These people are dangerous." "They think I am insane," I said, my voice quiet. "My son and his wife are taking me to a specialist tomorrow to have me legally declared incompetent so they can take control of my assets and put me in a home." Alistair was silent. "I am not letting them get arrested by the government." "Alistair, I am not letting them get a plea deal. They took my husband. They took my son. They tried to take my mind. I am not done with them. I want them to pay. In front of me." The doctor's appointment was exactly what I expected. The office was sleek, grey, and smelled like chemicals. The doctor, a man named Spurlock, had a tan that was too perfect and teeth that were too white. Brenda and Matthew sat on either side of me. "Eleanor," Dr. Spurlock said, his voice a smooth condescension. "How are we feeling today?" I think I'm in the wrong place," I whispered, pulling at my sleeve. "This isn't my bank." Matthew winced. Brenda put a comforting hand on mine, a gesture of pure theatre for the doctor. The questions began. Simple. "What year is it?" I smiled politely. "It's 1993. "Who is the president?" "Mr. Reagan. A wonderful man." The doctor scribbled on his pad. "And this man, sitting next to you," he said, gesturing to my son. "Can you tell me who this is?" This was the true test. I looked at Matthew. His face was a mask of pale, sweating anxiety. He was terrified I would get it right. I studied his face, as if seeing it for the first time. I squinted. I'm not sure. He's a very nice young man. Did you bring me here?" "Dear." The sound Matthew made was a small, strangled gasp. He looked away, his shame a palpable thing in the room. Brenda's sigh was a masterpiece of faux sorrow. "See, doctor. It's all gone." "Doctor, Spurlock clicked his pen. He turned to Matthew. Based on my assessment, I am recommending immediate evaluation for inpatient care. She clearly lacks cognitive capacity and is a danger to herself. I will draft the official report. You are doing the right thing by pursuing 24/7 supervised care and taking control of her affairs. She is, for all intents and purposes, incapacitated. Brenda took the signed preliminary report from his hand, her knuckles white. She looked at me, not with pity, but with the cold, hard triumph of a predator that had finally run its prey to ground. Brenda returned from the doctor's office with the signed report, a document she held like a hunting trophy. I could feel the shift in the house immediately. The pretense of my settling in was over. The end game had begun. They were energized, moving with the swift, ugly purpose of predators who have cornered their meal. I heard Brenda on the phone in her office, her voice crisp and professional, using words like emergency filing, guardianship, and expedited hearing. They were not wasting a single moment. That evening, they ambushed me in the kitchen. I was, of course, staring blankly at the refrigerator, pretending to be confused by the handle. "Mom," Matthew said, his voice attempting a deep, sympathetic tone that he could not, in his weakness, possibly achieve. I turned to him, slowly, as if pulling my mind from a great distance. Brenda stood beside him, her arm linked through his, a portrait of the supportive, long-suffering wife. "We have some wonderful news," Matthew continued, staring at a spot on the floor just to the left of my foot. "Brenda and we've been doing a lot of research. For you. We just want you to be safe and happy," Brenda added, her smile a thin, white slash. "We found the most amazing place." "Mom," Matthew said, the words coming faster now, a rehearsed speech. "It's a supportive community, beautiful grounds, private rooms, round-the-clock care. They have activities. A place for the forgetful, a place for the inconvenient, a cage. And to celebrate," Brenda said, stepping forward. "We are going to have a special family dinner on Friday night, just the three of us, to talk about your exciting future." I let my eyes fill with watery, confused tears. I reached out a trembling hand and touched Matthew's arm. That's wonderful, my dear," I whispered, using the term of endearment from his childhood, a small, pathetic twist of the knife that I knew he would not even register. He flinched and pulled away. "Great. It's settled then. Friday night?" While the ghost packed a small overnight bag with her favorite shapeless cardigans, a performance for her captors, the archivist made her final preparations. I took my walk. I went to the park, found a secluded bench, and took out the burner phone. My first call was to my bank. The joint account I held with Matthew, the one containing all the proceeds from my house sale, had a very specific function. I had set it up with Arthur years ago. It required 2 signatures or 1 verbal authorization code to move any funds, a code Matthew did not have. I spoke the code, a sequence of numbers from our wedding anniversary and Arthur's service number, and I transferred every single cent to a new, private account at a different institution, an account opened by Alistair Finch that morning. My second call was to Alistair. "It's done?" I said. "They're moving Friday. The U.S. attorney is ready to move? Ellie?" His voice was grim. "He wants to pull them in now. He's worried about your safety." "They are having a celebration dinner for me on Friday," I said. my voice flat. They are going to present me with the papers for the asylum. I will not be safe until they are looking at me when the trap springs. Eleanor, are you ready? I interrupted. Friday night. I need you here at 8 o'clock, not a minute before. He sighed. We will be there at 8. One more thing. Alistair, I need a car, a town car, waiting for me at the end of the street at 8:30. You're not coming with us? I am not going to a federal building, I said. I am going to a hotel. I'll see you Friday. I made my last stop. I went to a small, independent electronics store and bought a simple, cheap RF signal detector. I returned to the house, to my basement room. I turned on the small device. It was silent. I swept it around the room, the way I had seen in movies. Nothing. I passed it over the lamp, the light fitting, the dented dresser. Nothing. Then I passed it over the digital alarm clock on my nightstand, the one Brenda had given me when I arrived, claiming my old one was too loud. The detector did not beep. It screamed, a high-pitched, solid whine that split the air. My blood did not run cold. It ignited. I sat on the bed and looked at the clock. I saw it now. Next to the red number display, a tiny, perfect, black pinhole, a lens. They had been watching me. All those nights, when I cried in my pillow, when I held Arthur's letter, when I slept. They had been watching me, searching for any sign of the woman I used to be, searching for the evidence they knew Arthur must have left. The rage was so pure, so absolute. It was almost silent. It settled over me like a shroud of ice. I realized, in that moment, that I was not just a witness. I was a target. Arthur had been a target. This was not just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. I turned the alarm clock so the lens faced the blank wall. Let them wonder. Friday night arrived. The house was filled with the rich, heavy scent of roasting beef, a deliberate display of affluence. Brenda had set the formal dining table, the one we never used, with their wedding china and gleaming silver. She was the image of the gracious, dutiful daughter-in-law, her hair swept up, a silk blouse caressing her throat. She smiled at me, a wide, predatory expression that she mistook for kindness. Matthew was a wreck. He was already on his second glass of wine before we even sat down, his face pale and clammy. He fumbled with the wine bottle, his hands visibly shaking as he refilled his own glass, splashing a few dark red drops on the white linen tablecloth. Brenda shot him a look of pure venom, which he missed, his eyes fixed on his plate. I, on the other hand, had never felt calmer. The icy clarity in my veins was absolute. I was the ghost, the confused old woman, and I played my part to perfection. I allowed Matthew to pull out my chair, fumbling with my hands in my lap. I picked up my heavy silver fork and held it, as if unsure of its purpose, before slowly, deliberately, taking my first bite. "It's delicious, Brenda," I said, my voice quiet, slightly reedy. "You are such a wonderful cook." Brenda's smile tightened. "I just want everything to be perfect for you. Eleanor, tonight is all about you, your future." Matthew drank his wine in 3 large gulps and immediately refilled the glass. He was not eating. He was staring at the centerpiece, a large, sterile arrangement of white lilies that smelled faintly of a funeral home. "Mom," he began, his voice cracking. He cleared his eyes fixed on his plate. I, on the other hand, had never felt calmer. The icy clarity in my veins was absolute. I was the ghost, the confused old woman, and I played my part to perfection. I allowed Matthew to pull out my chair, fumbling with my hands in my lap. I picked up my heavy silver fork and held it, as if unsure of its purpose, before slowly, deliberately, taking my first bite. "It's delicious, Brenda," I said, my voice quiet, slightly reedy. "You are such a wonderful cook." Brenda's smile tightened. "I just want everything to be perfect for you. Eleanor, tonight is all about you, your future." Matthew drank his wine in 3 large gulps and immediately refilled the glass. He was not eating. He was staring at the centerpiece, a large, sterile arrangement of white lilies that smelled faintly of a funeral home. "Mum," he began, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat, his knuckles white as he gripped his wineglass. "Mum, we need to talk about—" "Yes, we do," Brenda interrupted. Her voice was no longer soft. It was crisp, efficient. She reached to the side table, and with a single, smooth motion, she retrieved a thick stack of documents bound in a blue legal cover. She placed it on the table between my plate and hers with a heavy, final thud. "Legal papers?" she announced, her smile gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. Matthew flinched at the sound. "This," Brenda said, tapping the cover with one perfectly manicured finger, "is our application for guardianship. For your own good. Of course." She looked at me, her eyes glinting in the candlelight. "Dr. Spurlock's report confirmed everything. You are no longer cognitively capable of taking care of yourself, Eleanor, or your finances." Matthew, as if on cue, pushed a heavy, expensive-looking pen across the table. His hand was shaking so badly the pen rolled in a slight arc. "It's just a formality, Mum," he whispered, his eyes still glued to the tablecloth. "It's just so we can manage things, so we can move you to the community. All you have to do is sign here, so we can take care of you." Take care of you. The words hung in the air, thick and poisoned. I did not look at the pen. I did not look at Brenda. I looked at the thick stack of papers that represented my erasure. I looked at the weak, broken man who was my son, a stranger sweating in a suit. Then, I looked at my enemy, the woman who had crushed my life in her fist. I let the silence stretch. I let them sit in it. Matthew vibrating with anxiety, Brenda pulsing with victory. Then I spoke. My voice was not the reedy whisper of the ghost. It was the clear, projecting voice of a head librarian who could quiet a noisy reading room without raising a shout. It was strong, and it was cold. "Take care of me," I asked, my voice slicing through the heavy air. They both froze. Matthew's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. Brenda's triumphant smile faltered, her face tightening in confusion. It was the first time in months they had heard my real voice. I leaned forward, my eyes locking with my son's. "Like you took care of your father." "Matthew." Matthew just stared, his mouth slack, his face a grotesque mask of confusion. Brenda, however, recovered instantly. Her features hardened, the false sympathy vanishing, replaced by pure, cold fury. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "Sign the papers. Eleanor, you are confused." I laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound, rusty from disuse. But it was a laugh. I pushed the heavy stack of legal papers back across the polished table, scraping a faint line in the wood. I think not. From the deep pocket of my old cardigan, I withdrew Arthur's leather-bound ledger. I placed it on the table, right between the platter of cooling beef and the congealing puddle of spilled wine. It landed with a soft, heavy thud, a sound heavier than any gavel. I think we should discuss this instead. If Brenda's face had been pale before, it was now the colour of ash. She recognized the book. Her eyes widened, not in confusion, but in the absolute, sickening terror of recognition. "Where did you get that?" she shrieked, her voice cracking, losing all its polished control. She lunged, her body moving across the table, knocking over her own glass, her painted fingernails clawing at the air, trying to snatch the ledger. "Stop," I commanded. The word was not a plea. It was a roar. It was the voice of the head archivist, the voice of a woman who commanded silence and order, and it hit her with the force of a physical blow. Brenda froze, her hand hovering just inches from the book, her chest heaving. "Mom, what is that?" Matthew babbled, looking wildly between us. "Brenda, what is that book?" "Ask your wife, Matthew," I said, my voice now a blade, cutting through the hysteria. "Ask her about her real job as chief financial officer, or you can ask her boss, Mr. Hartman. Ask her about the shell companies, or the accounts in the Cayman Islands that Arthur found. Or, perhaps, you should just ask her why Viridian Trust Solutions paid you a bonus of over $100,000 last month." Matthew's head whipped toward his wife, his face a mask of pale, dawning horror. "Brenda, you said that was your bonus. You said—" "He's an idiot," Brenda screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me, her eyes wild. "She's just a crazy old woman. She doesn't know what she's doing." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. I pushed my chair back and stood up, the frail, bent woman they had tried to create vanishing completely. "I know that Arthur found you. I know he tracked your entire dirty money scheme, and I know you killed him for it." "He had a heart attack," she shrieked. "You didn't use a gun," I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. "You used pressure. You used threats. You threatened him. You threatened his family. You squeezed him until his good, strong heart, the heart he gave me for 40 years, just gave out under the strain." I reached into my other pocket. I pulled out the digital alarm clock. "And I know you were watching me," I said, holding it up. I turned it over, showing them the tiny black pinhole. "You were terrified I would find this. You were watching me, hoping I would lead you to Arthur's proof." Matthew looked at the camera, then at his wife. The final, fragile support of his denial shattered. "Brenda, you," he whispered. He staggered back, clutching his stomach. Brenda's rage turned on him, her last defense. "You are a part of this, Matt," she gnarled. "You loved spending the money. You loved the house. You loved the car. You spent it. You spent the money." The doorbell rang. It was exactly 8 o'clock. The chime was clear, polite, and cut through the room like an executioner's bell. Matthew yelped, a high-pitched sound of pure panic. "Who is that?" he babbled. I smoothed the front of my cardigan. "That would be my lawyer, Alistair Finch," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "And I do believe he has brought some very interested friends with him from the FBI. You see, a perfect copy of this ledger, along with Arthur's hard drive and that very illuminating audio recording of Brenda's voice, was delivered to their office 1 week ago. Brenda did not scream. She just collapsed. The sound was not loud, just a heavy, boneless slump as she fell back into her expensive dining chair, her eyes vacant. Matthew bent double, a violent, retching sound tearing from his throat, and vomited the entire contents of his celebration dinner onto the white linen tablecloth. I did not look at them again. I walked past the filth, past the wreckage of my son's life, and through the cold, silent living room. I opened the front door. Alistair Finch stood on the porch, his face grim. Behind him stood 2 men and 1 woman in dark suits, their badges clipped to their belts. "Mrs. Vance," Alistair said, his voice respectful. "I did not invite them in." I simply stepped aside and pointed back toward the dining room. "They are in there," I said. "Both of them." I walked past Alistair, past the federal agents as they moved with swift, silent purpose into the house. I did not turn to watch them pull a catatonic Brenda from her chair. I did not pause to listen to the broken, hysterical sobs of my son as they put him in handcuffs. I walked down the perfect stone pathway, onto the quiet, dark street. I took my first deep, clean breath of the cold night air. At the end of the block, just as I had ordered, a black town car was waiting, its headlights a warm, welcoming glow. I opened the back door, slid onto the smooth leather seat, and did not look back. Thank you for listening, and please comment where you're tuning in from so we can connect, share your thoughts, and be sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story be heard.